Hey everyone, happy Sunday. Have just a few announcements for us this morning before we get into our Sunday school lesson. I want to invite you again, if you haven't joined us on WhatsApp, to go ahead and do that. Parents, that's a texting app. They can use it just with Wi-Fi. It's the group is called RVAC Students, and if you have a hard time getting into the group, you can text me or call me or shoot me an email or something like that, and we'll make sure that you get the invite. We also have the RVAC Student Ministries page on Facebook. That's going to be where I post updates and things like that periodically as we're kind of stuck in this limbo right now, being quarantined. But I realize, parents, that's probably more for you. So kids, if your parents aren't watching with you, first of all, shame them because they need to see. No, I'm kidding. Go tell them to join the River Valley Alliance Church Student Ministries page. Next thing is that we are going to start youth group tonight. We are not going to let this coronavirus stop us from gathering, in some sense anyway. And for the foreseeable future, we're going to have it on Zoom, Sunday nights at 6 p.m. That's going to be both for middle school and high school together. If it becomes apparent that we would like a little more focus on each of the different groups, I'll make that happen as well. We'll be flexible with this. I'm still learning how all this works and about the dangers of Zoom and how we can mitigate those dangers and how we might play games online and stuff like that. But I want us to gather, and just a little bit of information on Zoom. You guys, you can download the app on your phone, on your tablet. You can go just in a web browser, and all you need, if you're not doing it on a phone, is you're going to need at least a microphone. If you don't have a webcam, which would be ideal, you can just use a microphone. But you're going to go to Join Meeting, and then you're going to put in that code 849-073-2955 in the meeting ID number. And that'll let you into the meeting a few minutes early at least. We have like a waiting room thing. So hopefully we have a little more of the hiccups ironed out this time. And I'm looking forward to seeing you, or at least hearing you, this Sunday night. As always, that's my personal cell phone number. You can text me. You can call me if you have questions, if you have ideas, if you are bored. Though I would prefer, if you're bored, to just go on the WhatsApp page and have meme battles with us. That would be great. But if you have any questions over any of the topics we're discussing, or if you need a little more information, or if you want to follow up with some study materials or stuff like that, guys, I would be happy, as always, to do that now. But especially now, since we're so isolated, it's to be a good time for us to just reach out to one another. Okay. We are in Matthew chapter 8. We have just completed the Sermon on the Mount. We have just listened to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And just to go back to chapter 7, verse 28, it says, "When Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes." Chapter 8, verse 1 says, "When he came down from the mountain, great crowds followed him. And behold, a leper came to him and knelt before him, saying, 'Lord, if you will, you can make me clean.' And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, 'I will, be clean.' And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, 'See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a proof to them.'" Now, the first thing I want to say is, at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, this is a picture of Jesus. This is depicting at least Jesus at the Sermon on the Mount, teaching great crowds. What you need to imagine is that this picture does not even show the amount of people that were present. Not even close. There were hundreds of people following Jesus. And as he sat down to teach them, they were astonished and mesmerized at his teaching. So one of the reasons that Jesus' teaching was so different, and one of the reasons the crowds continued to follow him, was because Jesus taught with authority. And by that, what he means is the scribes, the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, what they would do is they would cite the Old Testament, of course, but they would also cite tradition and noteworthy teachers. They were consistently relying on human authority on top of the scripture in order to make what they said have merit or have value. Jesus did not teach this way, though Jesus did quote and draw and allude to the Old Testament. He made it very clear. He spoke as though he had an authority to clarify himself. Okay? So Jesus' lack of quoting any human authority meant either one of two things, if we're being honest. Either that A, he was a proud heretic, a blasphemer, or B, his lack of quoting human authority was because he actually spoke with the authority of God. This caught the attention of these crowds. Now you can go back to right before the Sermon on the Mount, where you see Jesus is ministering to these great crowds of people. And in chapter 5, verse 1, he says, seeing the crowds is when he began his sermon. And it was that same group of people, those large crowds of people, are now following him. And he does the first miracle we see in the book of Matthew. Why this is the first miracle Matthew quotes, remembers, I don't know. I don't know what the purpose of that is, if we're being completely transparent. But what we can glean from this is that great crowds continue to follow him, suggests just how special, just how unique, just how much Jesus drew people in. And it says that a leper came to him after he finished. Now, leprosy was, it's a general term that talks about skin disease. But when we think about leprosy today, we're talking about the kind of skin disease that endures and never goes away. We're talking about the kind of skin disease that in Jewish culture did not just make you a social outcast, but made you ceremonially unclean. You were a religious outcast. This Jewish man who was suffering with this skin disease was not even allowed to go into the temple. Lepers were social outcasts. For a Jew, that meant that they were religiously outcast as well. They were unclean. They would have to announce themselves by saying, unclean, unclean. They're shouting out to everyone around them, I'm a leper. Don't touch me. Don't come near me. This man risked everything to push through these crowds to see Jesus, having to announce himself, having to come in the middle of this crowd, shouting that he's unclean. And he kneels down before Jesus. It says here, he knelt before him saying, Lord. There are two things about this man and the way that he approached Jesus that I want to point out. The first one, he kneels down, he calls Jesus Lord, though maybe he didn't quite recognize exactly who Jesus was. I do believe that he had a reverence for Jesus. So calling someone Lord, the word kurios in Greek, is more than just calling someone sir. Okay, this is a term of reverence. And kneeling down before someone, prostrating yourself in this way, it also shows that this man had a great reverence for Jesus. And then the next thing he does is he says, if you will, you can make me clean. If you will, you can make me clean. So with a respect for the sovereignty of Jesus, as well as a belief in his ability to heal him, this man showed incredible trust. These are the elements that we need when we come to Jesus. He knelt before Jesus in reverence. He trusted in Jesus. Not just his ability to heal him, I don't believe, but I do think that it was more. It was something about who Jesus was, the way he spoke. Perhaps he had heard about Jesus at his baptism. Perhaps he had heard about some miracle that Jesus had performed. Perhaps he had overheard the teaching of the Sermon on the Mount and was absolutely intrigued and is now following as closely as he can to Jesus, just so he might happen to get close to him. And we see here what I think the most shocking thing that Jesus could have done. He reached out his hands and he touched this man. I want you to think of for just a second, in our current climate, just how this isolation is affecting you. Mentally, psychologically, emotionally, even physically. How is this isolation affecting you? Now, I want you to think for a moment that this leper, for this man, quarantine on a level you have never experienced was his life. Extreme isolation was this man's reality. This man had not been touched by another human being conceivably since he contracted this disease. Why touch him? Think for a moment why Jesus would touch him. You're going to see in just the very next verses that Jesus does not need to be present to heal someone. Jesus needs nothing more than to will it, and it will be so. Why touch him? I think on this day, there was a double healing. I think there's more than just a physical healing. The obvious thing that happens is Jesus says, I will be clean. And the man's skin was clean. His skin was whole. Everything about him was healed, completely healed. But with a single gesture, Jesus treated this man with the greatest possible dignity. As I said, Jesus could have healed the man with a thought, but he reaches out and touches him because the double healing was that part on the inside that we can't see. The pain in knowing you'll never, ever be able to experience touch again. The extreme isolation and what it does to a person's mind, body, spirit. What if Jesus is not content to just heal your physical limitations? What if the more profound healing is the one that took place on the inside of this man's heart, his mind, and his body? With a single touch, Jesus restored the years of isolation and psychological torment and anguish, the being ceremonially unclean, the being a social outcast. All of that was gone in an instant. This man's reality shifted, not just because his skin was clear, but because Jesus touched him. Jesus then tells him in verse 4, say nothing to anyone, but go and show yourself to the priests and offer the gift that Moses commanded. In Leviticus 14, there is a command that if your leprosy was healed, or if your skin disease was healed, you present yourself to the priest. The priest would do a ceremony. The person who was being cleaned would offer up an offering, and after a time they would be able to go back into community, the society. And so Jesus sends this man to make it official. I am blown away by this story. This is exactly what I need to hear sometimes, and I hope this is exactly what you need to hear. And I just want to ask you, some of us want a limited healing. What if Jesus is not content with just healing that, but he wants to bring health and healing to every part of your life? You are a whole person. You're not just a physical being. You're not just a mental being. You're not just a emotional, psychological being. You are a whole person. And what if Jesus wants to bring health and healing to every single part of you? For this leper, that's exactly what he did. And so as you reflect on this today, as you think about this, what are some ways that you might even be limited in your understanding of how Jesus wants to help you? I'm even talking beyond asking God to just heal you of a certain disease or something like that. This shows the heart of God. He is not just content to help you in one area of your life. He wants to help every area of your life. And he has the power and ability to do it. And the great care. Just with 4 words, I will be clean. And a simple touch. Jesus changed this man's life. So as we wrestle with passages like this, I am asking you now to make this personal. Consider that Jesus doesn't just want to heal one aspect of your life, but that he is deeply concerned about every part of you. Until next time, I'm praying for you. I love you. I miss you. I hope to see you guys tonight. And until we see each other face to face, God bless you, loved ones.